Good. All right, now here's what you know. There's something about this where we have these like interesting sort of habits and things that we do that we thought we would never do. Isn't that the case? Like for some of us, there's a piece of this that just goes, there's something about our life and the ways that we like move through the world where we find ourselves in these moments doing things that we thought we'd never do. And there's a lot of funny versions of this, right? I mean, there's all the funny things you thought you would never do, and now you do. I was serious. Like us going to bed early in college, I was the person who stayed up like all night. I was the person who like stayed up all night, and I was a night owl. You remember this? How many of you were like night people in college? Anybody night people in college? And how many of you are no longer night people anymore? Anybody? Yeah, you get it. Like things that you thought you would never do. You know, this is interesting because there's a ton of these things. But there's also pieces of us that when we think about who we are now versus who we were before, there's certain things that have shaped our lives, like our habits, the things that we've got hang-ups around, the struggles that we have, even the good things that we that have made us who we are today. And there's a piece of us that goes, there's probably something in us that's proud of who we are today. There's probably a piece of us that wishes some things were different. There's certainly pieces of us that wishes trajectories of our life might have been a little bit different. And all of a sudden you begin to look at all of these little moments along the way, and they make up you. And they're like personal things that are connected to you and your story, right? If you think back to like the first dates that you had, right, back in whenever you started having first dates, you think about all the questions that we ask each other, and it's all about like, what's your favorite this, and how do you navigate these things? And there's all these like small personal steps along the way. And for some of us, we have all these sort of things when it comes to our family. For some of you, when we talk about church, that was a part of your journey growing up. Like if church was interesting to you and it was maybe personal for a little bit, but it was certainly personal to your family. I always love asking this question. How many of you grew up with parents that attended church pretty regularly? Anybody do that? All right, we'll do the whole thing. How many of you like grew up in churches where like your parents didn't hardly at all go around church? Anybody do that? Yeah. And how many of you were like creasters? Like you went on Christmas and Easter every once in a while. Anybody do that? Yeah, there's a little bit of that. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And you get this. Do what? Creasters? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's church thing. That's pastor talk, isn't it? Right? Yeah. So you got all these sort of things. Now, here's what's interesting about church and specifically the ways that it connects to our personal stories, right? When you think about a lot of the churches maybe that you've been around or been a part of or even talked about, it was almost like there was a church, right? There was a church that you were part of, right? Now, even Nuvo for some people, like when you think about it, at one point, there was this church called Nuvo that you had never attended. And for some of you, this is your first time. There was like a church that you had been a part of, but there was like a church that you were at. And then you came, and then when you started talking about it, it wasn't just a church. All of a sudden, it became like this church that we go to sometimes, or this church that we showed up to. And there's like and now it moves from like an A thing to like a this kind of thing. Like it's this church that we're a part of, but still there's a little bit of distance to it. And if you're really honest along the way, you've been a part of churches, you've been around churches where you were a participant, but it never actually felt personal. Now, whether it was personal or not is different, but it never felt personal, right? Like you kind of think of it like this. You wouldn't say this out loud, but church for you is kind of like one of your favorite restaurants. I like going to my favorite restaurants, right? I enjoy that. And I show up to my favorite restaurants. And I'm a person who gets there. I enjoy the experience, but it is not a personal thing for me. I love Outback a lot. They know me by name, right? There's a little bit of this. But at the end of the day, it's not like it doesn't feel personal. And the reason it doesn't feel personal is because when I go, I'm a part of this thing, but I'm not necessarily contributing to this thing, right? I put it in mind this way, that I keep a safe distance by consuming, but not really contributing, right? So what we're going to do is go ahead and ask the ushers to come forward. We're going to pass an offering plate. No, I'm just kidding. We're not doing that. I promise, right? But there's a piece of this, come on, you know this, where it is very easy to be a part of a place where you can consume and not contribute. And I'm not just talking about finances, right? You can consume but not contribute to the overall whole of the thing. Now, what's interesting about you choosing to be here, so let me just tell you what's interesting about this, is there's, 1,000 churches in Columbus. There's a lot of churches in Columbus, right? But you to come here to an old Italian restaurant that wasn't a church until about a year ago, right? You to decide to come to what's called like a church plant, which is always fun. If you don't know that language, like, what are you planting? I don't understand. I'm gardening. I don't know. Like, what is this? Like, or a church launch, and people get a little bit nervous about that. Like, what are you launching? You know, there's a little bit of weirdness there. But if you come to a new church, and then you walk in, here's what you also recognize real quick, is that there's enough of you, but you can also come to a church that's newer and go, it feels like everybody's kind of contributing in some way, right? Because of the newness of the startup thing. And so I tell people all the time, especially we do this thing called Nuda Nuvo. We're actually doing it next week. But I do this thing where I tell people, like on their first or second time coming, I'm like, whether you meant to or not, you accidentally showed up to build something because it's hard to come to something that's new and not be a builder when you're a part of it, right? And so the thing that's interesting is sometimes we feel more like a consumer than a contributor. The problem with you is that you showed up to a place where it almost feels like everybody contributes in some way, right? Now, people contribute in small ways, big ways, all across the board, but there's something about the contribution of something that's brand new that, come on, you decided to be a part of. There's a lot of churches that you could go to and get lost today and never have to talk to anybody and sneak in. It would be a great experience. You sneak out and you never have to be there, or nobody even really know that you're there. And so you've chosen to be a part of a place where that's not the case, or somebody invited you and you're realizing that's the place that you're at now, and whoops, so there's that too, right? So here's what we're gonna do, right? Here's what we're gonna do for the next few minutes. I'm gonna share an area of the Bible that's one of my favorite passages in all of Scripture. And the reason it's one of my favorites is that it's almost like subliminally, it gives this beautiful picture of what Jesus actually teaches, but also expects of people who are followers of Jesus. And so I'll say this today, if you're not a follower of Jesus, you're a little bit off the hook, right? This is a piece where you get to almost look and point and say, ha, suckers. There's a little bit of that, right? But if you are a follower of Jesus, what you discover very quickly about the way that Jesus teaches and the miracles that Jesus does is that there is more to it than just the miracle that he's a part of. So to give you a little bit of context, we're going to be in John, the area of the Bible called John. It's written by a guy who is very fascinating. He had very close proximity to Jesus, and he outlines a lot of the details in the Gospels about the events that took place around Jesus and the miracles that he did. And so what had happened is Jesus had been teaching. He's been doing all of these extraordinary things. He kind of got to this almost status in the ancient world, not just because of his teaching, but because of his miracles. So he would teach, lots of people would come and see him to see what he was going to do. So I've done like equivalents to like Bono a little bit, or Bieber. Terrible equivalences. There you go. There's a tweet for you. But they kind of got big because everybody knew who they were. And so he was famous in the ancient world as a rabbi. There's all of these rabbis. He's not unique in the fact that he's a rabbi. He's unique in the fact that he's doing something that other people aren't doing, and people are talking about it. And so people are showing up to hear him teach. And then all of a sudden, he finds out that somebody who's close to him is sick, and then that person who's close to him ends up passing away. And what Jesus does is he then goes to this area where his friend had passed away. So we're going to pick up in the midst of that. That's the context of what's going on. Here's what it says, right? We're going to be in John chapter 11. It says this. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus, who was his friend, had already been in the tomb for 4 days, right? So his friend had passed away. He sort of waited before he went. He finished the things that he did. He'd done all these miracles. So people sort of expected him to do miracles. And the expectation a little bit with Jesus was if you could do miracles, that you could probably show up on behalf of this person and make them better because he had made people better. But he essentially doesn't go with urgency. He lets him, in some ways, pass away. This guy's been in the tomb for 4 days. And what happens next is one of my, again, favorite parts of the Bible because it shows the raw human emotion of people interacting with Jesus. Here's what it says. It says, now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary, who are related to Lazarus, to comfort them in the loss of their brother, right? So this is Lazarus' sisters. People have come in, which is sort of customary. This isn't just like they're coming to make them feel better. This is a customary practice for them to come and grieve with them. And when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. And this is one of those fun, theological people love talking about this sort of thing, you Martha or Mary, all this kind of stuff. What's fascinating, though, is that one of them goes out to meet him and the other one stays back. And then what happens is the raw interaction between this woman who believes likely that Jesus could have provided some sort of healing or betterment for her brother, but he let him die. She says this. She says, Lord, if you had been here, if you had shown up, if you had come, if you had been a part of what was going on, if you had been here, if you would have shown up, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Now, this is fascinating because she believes that if you could heal somebody, then maybe you could do more than just heal them. But the raw human emotion of this, and you know this too, and some of you prayed this prayer, is God, if you would have simply shown up in the ways that I thought you should have shown up, we wouldn't have even been here. We're not wrapping my dead brother in grave cloths. We're not We're not putting them in a tomb. We're not doing that sort of thing. If you had shown up, and then even in the midst of this, I don't want you to miss this, even in the midst of this, Jesus leans in not just to her request, but her emotion. And she has faith in the midst of this that he could still do the miraculous. And so Jesus says to her, your brother will rise again. Now here's what happens, I think it's so fascinating. This is, again, such raw beauty, I think, in this. It says, your brother will rise again. Now, I don't want you to miss this, which can be easily taken like one day, everything will be made right. One day there will be some sort of resurrection. Some of you, if you believe in heaven, someday there will be something beyond this that's with God, will be reunited again. And rather than leaning into the immediate sort of healing, this is where her mind goes. She says this, she goes, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. And then what Jesus says next is one of the kinds of phrases that would have likely gotten him killed. And this is so fascinating. Because what he begins to talk about isn't that he's just a rabbi, not that he's just a good teacher, not even that he's just a miracle worker. What he says next outlines the personhood of divinity that is in him. And he says this, he says, I am the resurrection and the life. Showing that all of the power for all of that exists in Jesus. I am the resurrection and the life. And the one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Which again, all of that is kind of connected to this out there one day when it's all said and done and all of it's over. There's something more than this. And then it's like he leans in. And again, I wasn't there, that would have been great, but I picture it as if he leans into her and he simply says this. He says, do you believe this kind of thing? Do you believe this? Do you believe this? Now, come on. The critical thinkers in the room that are wired like me, here's a piece of you, and if I was standing around near this, I would have probably felt the same thing. It's like, I believe that beyond natural things happen, but that's like way beyond natural. You know what I mean? Like you look out into the future, like I'm not sure what to do with that. And there's a piece of you, and you know this, that even if you've had the strongest beliefs at some point in your life, many of us have experienced things that were painful and difficult and unexplainable, and it felt like God was silent, he was distant. And there's a piece of us that goes, does he exist at all? Because if a good God could, then a good God should do all the things that a good God should do. And if you don't do that, you have to. And it's interesting. Nobody ever likes to talk about it like this, because I grew up in contexts where you believe or you don't. It's black or it's white. It's this or it's not. The problem with that is that you experience life. And you know that in the midst of that, there is pain and difficulty and suffering and things that you can't explain. And sometimes, come on, even the people who are the strongest followers of Jesus feel like belief is almost like a mist, that it's like it's there, and then it evaporates quickly, right? We do this thing with our kids, which is so much fun. It doesn't work on Henry anymore because he's a little older now, but with our youngest kids, when it's cold out, and you know when you blow and there's like whatever the cold air cloud, what do you call that? Vapor? Is that what that is? Some of you are like, you're stupid. Anyway, yeah. Like whatever this thing is, right? So we'll blow it out. And here's what I'll do. I'll look at our young kids. I do this with Henry all the time. I was like, see if you can grab it, which is really fun. Like you do this outside at like a Target, and everybody just starts gathering around. Like, what's wrong? And he's just like trying to grab it. And you know this. You ever thought about this? And you grab it, it's just like it dissipates as soon as your hand gets to it. It's just like it's there, and then it's gone. And I grew up in contexts a lot of times where people would say, you just need to believe more. How do you believe more? How do you just believe more? Like you just need to cling to Jesus, right? Which is a beautiful thing to say, and also but when I reach for it, sometimes it feels like it's just gone. And if you do and you don't, whatever, what do you do then? And you read this next part, and I think it's so beautiful and it's so powerful. He says, do you believe this? And she says, yes, Lord, I believe that you're the Messiah, which is a way of her responding to saying, this thing that you say that you are, I believe that you are. I believe you're Messiah, the Son of God, who is coming to the world. But this statement is almost hard to say, I believe, right? Let's go to the next one. If we could say, I believe. What does that mean? I believe. Now, if you're gonna outline a definition, and you know this, I don't have to say it, but the definition of this is fairly simple. There's two. It says to consider to be true or honest, to accept the word this part's always fun for me, or evidence of. The evidence is almost the thing that makes it where it doesn't feel like a vapor, right? The evidence of, or the second part is this, and you know this, to accept something as true or genuine or real. There's a part of the vapor thing, that's what's so fascinating about faith, that when you reach for it and it feels like it dissipates or it goes away, there's something that goes like, then what are you left with? And if you talk to people who have been followers of Jesus through suffering or pain or difficulty or struggle, you know this, that oftentimes what they're reaching for isn't blind belief. It's experience that has evidence of a Savior. And the interesting part about this is you can't muster that up. You can't close your eyes and then I believe more, right? Do we have any Browns fans in the room? Where are my Browns fans? Browns fans? There's not a better way to communicate this. All right, let's do that. Every Browns fan, just stand up for a second. Don't we, come on, let's give it up for our Browns fans. Yeah. No, keep standing. We all have sin in our hearts. No, keep standing for a second. We're not done. We're going to do a thing with y'all. We're going to help y'all. So, I just want everybody in this room to do this, right? Let's just do it. Everybody close your eyes real quick. Grip your hands. All the Browns fans, grip your hands. I'm not going to be weird. I'll just grip your hands like this and believe, muster it up. Believe for that championship right now. Everybody at the count of 3. Do it together. Come on. Now, everybody look at me. Now, do you believe more? But it's okay. We love y'all. Y'all go ahead and sit down. You get it, right? You know it, right? I could do this with the Detroit Lions. It would be even more fun. You know what I mean? It'd be great. Now, come on. You know this. You know this. You don't muster it up. You can pretend. You can hope. But you can't root your belief that way, right? I put it in my notes this way. Belief, right? And certainty, right? It's cultivated. But belief and faith are not like a certainty kind of thing in that way, right? I put in my notes, the opposite of faith isn't doubt. It's not. And a lot of us were taught that. The opposite of faith is misplaced certainty in something that you don't have evidence of, or you don't lean into, right? Faith is not about all of the certainty things that you grapple with or pretend that you have. Faith is about where you've placed your trust. And that's different. Because where I place my trust can expand with my questions and my doubt. Where I place my trust can expand with the circumstances that I feel and then I experience. Where I place my trust can be a foundational bedrock, even when I don't understand why good God does the things that God does sometimes. And so this continues on. You have this moment where Martha ends up getting Mary, and he comes to Jesus. And she doesn't come to Jesus with the tap you on the shoulder, hug it out, quiet, happiness sort of thing. Here's what she says. She says this passionately. All right, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she falls at his feet and says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Now, I picture this with toddlers. You have toddlers, you know this? When Oliver does this right now. I feel like when they're 1.5, they should wear helmets. It should be a requirement for everyone, right? He's extraordinarily confident in his movement and extraordinarily not ready to move that way, you know? And everything he does, he runs, and when he gets close to the couch, he's 4 feet away. He's like, no, I can stop, but he doesn't. And he just runs into it, right? Have you ever seen somebody fall like that? You ever seen an adult crumble? Where everything, it was like the strength was lost when they found something. I told you the story a little bit about my mom when she was diagnosed with cancer and we found that out. I was seventh grade. And I was more athletic then, but all those kinds of things. And I remember sitting in our, was it Ford Explorer? Remember the Ford Explorers of the 90s, you know? And feeling my body it just crumbled, it was a loss. You ever see somebody turn white as a sheet like that? It's like she comes running to Jesus and falls at his feet. You could have been here. You could have stopped this. And she has this relational interaction with Jesus that doesn't question his ability. It questions his intent. And that's the harder one, right? Some of you can get around something that's powerful than you and beyond you. What you have trouble getting around is why that God would allow those things to exist or be. And he questions his intent. And then it goes on, it says this. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, it says he was deeply moved in spirit. Which wasn't like, and this is different. It's different than you watch a commercial in the Super Bowl and it gets you. It's different than the movie that just gets you. It's when something moves you at a level that's beyond the ways that most guys talk about anything, Like it's at a heart level, at a soul level. He's moved in spirit and troubled. It says, where have you laid him? And I said, come and see, Lord. And the next two words, it bothers me that we make jokes, and I make jokes about it all the time. It's like, you can memorize verse, 2 words. But these 2 words are so incredibly powerful of how they speak to the character of God. It simply says that Jesus, he wept. Before Jesus ever does a miracle, he joins them in their suffering. And this is one of the things that makes Christianity so fascinating and unique, is it's not saying get better. It's not saying do better. It's not saying strive harder. It's not saying that God looks at you like this all the time. You ready? Jesus entered into the world and didn't come with a sword. He didn't come in the ways that people thought that he was going to come to, avenge things or redeem things in that way. He came and he suffered and he died on a cross. And then you have moments like this where then he enters into the suffering with other people long before he does the miracle that's on the other side of it. He sits in their pain. And I'll tell you this, ready? This is the honest truth. Because I've been there with people. This is part of being a pastor. And in the moment when you're suffering, though, the honest truth is you don't want him to sit with you. You want him to solve the problem. And this is the really difficult thing. Is Christianity also teaches that the problem has been solved ultimately. And that the pain that we're in isn't the pain that we will always be in. And that the resurrection and redemption and the life that comes is not just here, but it's also there. And then we get to invite it to be here in the midst of our pain too. That the thing that we don't know that we need is the presence of Jesus. But that is the thing that we need and the thing that he gives in this. Now I love this, and you read text like this, again, people are like, I get bored of the Bible. I'm like, let me help you read it, because what's next is so fascinating, and it's like we all have this friend. Here's what it says. It says, and then the Jews said, oh, see how he loved him? Which is like the ignorant comedic people in the sitcom that just don't get it. You know what I'm talking about? Like they're all just like, oh, look, he loved him so much. Yes, he did. And also, that's not what this is about. And so all these people are around and they're seeing this stuff happen. Like, oh, look, he's emotional. Like we talk about Jesus all the time, not being the guy holding the lamb, and that's what they're all viewing him as right now. You know what I mean? Like sash, really great hair, and just, oh, that's not really what it is, because it moved him at a soul level. It did something like deeper than that. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? So I want you to picture this as best you can. There's these people over here who are all like, oh, look at him, he's so cute. And there's all these people over here that are probably wired much more like me, like, well, if he could have, then he should have. You know what I mean? They got their arms crossed. They're like, you listen here, like a little bit of, like they're ready to do this. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of that. They're the skeptical ones in the crowd that are really curious, and both of them exist around this moment. So then it says this. It says, Jesus, once more, deeply moved, goes to the tomb now. I want you to picture this. There's all these people. There have been a lot of people around Martha and Mary and their family shows up. All these people who are around helping them walk through this. Deeply moved, he comes to the tomb, and again, we don't think about this in our context, but it was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Now again, he's been there for 4 days. And he gets to the entrance and he says this. He says, take away the stone, which is a really awkward moment for most people here, right? Now, I want to give you as best of a visual as I could probably give you, right? This is the stone. This is what's going on. And he looks at this and he says, take away the stone. Now, I need a little bit of help real fast. So I'm going to call you if you can help me out real quick. Matt, can you come up here real quick? Travis, I'm looking at you. Bobby, come here. Eric, can you come here for a second? All y'all, just stretch it out. I know I've been going for a while. Come on up here. Look at these strong, strapping men. You got a Michigan shirt on? Go sit down. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Come on up. Come on up. Yeah, come on up here. That's great. All right. So I'm going to give you the best picture of this that I know how to give you because I think it's so fascinating. Let's just stand right over here if we can. Yeah, let's bring them all over here. Look at these guys. I feel like every one of you could beat me up. That's fantastic. Y'all not supposed to say that's true. Come on, people. Yeah. All right, now I want you to picture this. So what he does is he goes, look, we're going to move the rock. I want you to take this stone away. Now, this stone isn't like a little rock. This stone would have weighed several tons likely. So it's like move the car. That's what he's saying. So what happens is he looks over here at Matt. Matt, come over here real quick. We're going to act out. You ready to act for a little bit? All right, so holy cow. All right, anyways, all right. I want you to feel like you're moving that stone. Show me like you're going to move that stone. Oh, holy crap. Avengers, unite. No, okay. All right, push that. Yeah, move it. No, that's great. Do it. All right, move that stone. So Matt's over here trying to move the stone. You know what? Everybody's looking around like Matt can't do it by himself. He's not able to do it by himself. So he's pushing, not working. And then he's like, call over Travis. Travis looks like he's really strong. Travis, let me see you move the stone with Matt. And Travis is like, look, I got another way. Let's try it this way. And it's not working. Can we just get a picture of this? This is good. Okay, no. Okay. And we call over Bobby. Bobby's like, look, I'm super strong. Bobby, come on. And he goes, he's a Michigan fan. And go ahead, keep pushing, go ahead. And then they're like, you should stop and go cheer for Michigan. I'm just kidding. No, there's that. And then Eric comes over, who's also a Michigan fan. I made a mistake. All right, let's try it again. OH. See, it works. It still works. All right, so everybody's pushing together. Push together. All right, push hard. Holy crap. Dang. If you're married to these men, I got you. Here's your moment right here. So you're all pushing. Now, here's what's fascinating. Everybody, I want you to push real quick. This is what's so fascinating. Keep pushing. If Jesus is over here watching these guys, it's great. He's like, look at them involved in this. This is so good. But you know what the skeptical people in the back of the room are saying? If you can raise a guy from the dead, can't you move a freaking rock? You know what I mean? Why do we need Travis and Matt and Bobby and Eric moving the rock? It's not for show. Because if you can raise somebody from the dead, you should be able to move a car or a rock. Am I right? Can we give it up for these strong men over here? Thank you, guys. Thank you there. Oh, wait. I'm just kidding. All right, great. Now, here's what I want you to think about this. And this is so fascinating about the ways that Jesus does his miracles, right? I want you to think about this. When he turns water into wine, right? Do you remember this, his first miracle? You know what's fascinating about this? He tells people to go get him the jugs of whatever they're going to do, right? The people have to bring it over in the big, not jugs, but whatever these big containers are. Which, again, like if I'm going to do that, you know what, I'm going to bring out some big old bottles. They're going to be like 9 feet high. So everybody know, look what I did. I'm not going to invite everybody else into it. I'm going to do the thing myself. And here's what's so fascinating when you look at some of these miracles that Jesus does, is he does the miracle and invites others into the moment to be a part of it. Right? I put in my notes this way. That what Jesus seemingly leaves unfinished is always an invitation to gather and join him. And this is what's so fascinating about this. Please don't miss this. Is that when it comes to what Jesus does in the world, what Jesus creates, and the miracles that he does, Jesus invites them, and I think he continues to invite people to be a part of the miracle, not simply a spectator of the miracle that he's about to do. And so you have this moment where Jesus is about to literally raise this guy out of this tomb. He gets these people to move the rock, and they move the rock. And then Martha says this, and I love this. Again, so human. But Lord, by this time there's a bad odor because he's been there for 4 days. Now, you know what I love about this? Is that she's like, I bet he smells bad. In the midst of all this, she's like, he didn't wear Old Spice. You know what I mean? Do we have any, if you've ever been around a 7th grade boy, you know exactly what we're talking about. Like he's going to smell bad. And then Jesus responds, he says, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Now, this is so powerful. And so what they do is those strong guys take away the stone. And then Jesus looks up and he says, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I knew that you would always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. So he's going to do a unique miracle with this group of people. And as best you can, I want you to picture this. There's all the skeptical people like me standing in the back with their arms crossed, curious, but a little bit angry. There's all the people like, oh, he's been crying so much. He's so sweet. There's that, right? And then there's the family in the midst of this watching, curious. And he looks at this and he says this. It says, Jesus called out in a loud voice. I don't know exactly what that would be like if you're Jesus yelling, but that'd be fun to watch. Lazarus, come out. And then you know what happens? The dead man came out. And his hands and his feet were wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And I'll tell you, when I pictured this as a kid, I pictured something equivalent to this kind of moment, right? Like you're going to walk out of the tomb, you're going to walk out and whatever that is. I don't know. You know, do we have LeBron fans in the room? Yeah, that's Michael Jordan. It's great. And so anyway, there's a little bit of that. Where's Josh at? Josh's so mad at me right now. Anyway, so I pictured this moment. Well, this was much more like was like a little kid dressed as a mummy at Halloween. Am I right? Like this is a little bit more of what this was like. He would have been wrapped in these grave cloths. He would have smelled, right? He would have had like some of this like cloth around his face. Can you imagine? You ever been like, can you imagine walking, like, come out of the grave, Lazarus? You know, I mean, like, what is this? Yeah, and he's walking out like, it was chaotic, it was messy, it smelled bad, it wasn't pretty, and it was extraordinarily powerful because of the human part of what's going on. The miracle was deeply human. He comes out in grave cloths, and then Jesus simply says this, and I love it. Here's what he says. He says, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Now, again, this is one of those things. If you're skeptical, and all skeptical people kind of watching around going, look, you raise somebody from the dead, you should be able to move the rock. If you're going to raise somebody from the dead, could you get the man some clothes? Could you not make it like this? And if you could you not figure out a way to not have to have me take the grave clothes off of the man, you know? But Jesus looks at them. I don't miss this. Ordinary people experiencing a miracle. And he says this. He says, you are the ones to go and move the rock. You're the ones to go and do that thing. But it reminds us that Jesus used ordinary people to participate in and experience the ordinary. Now, there's a lot of powerful things about this narrative, so many powerful things about what Jesus did, because it speaks to the beauty and the mess of suffering, and it speaks to the power of a broken heart in the midst of it. It speaks into the human nature that God came into the world as human and experienced the human pieces of this. But the other part about this that is very true, that I think people miss all the time, including me, is that if you want to experience the extraordinary work and power of Jesus, you experience it through stepping forward to experience it. If you wait until you're certain about the extraordinary in the world, you're going to miss the extraordinary in the world. Now, you believe this in other areas. A lot of us just don't believe it when it comes to faith. If you're entrepreneurial in the room, you know this. The business didn't exist. It was a blank piece of paper. And it was a blank piece of paper with something inside of you that you thought maybe could, that maybe one day, maybe ish, you know? And then all of a sudden, you went to the paper, and there was something on the paper. And then that paper turned into another thing, and then it turned into a business, and it turned into something that was making a difference in the world. And it started without certainty, and it started with a step of trust, faith, hope. And what was next? This is true. Come on, this is true. This is true in every area of our life. We just figure out a way to block off that piece of the belief when it comes to faith. And mostly it's because we don't know if we trust God with that part of our lives. And as much as I wish that God would show up in all the ways that I want him to before I ever took a step towards him, he doesn't. And also, most of the things in your life that matter the most didn't show up before you took a step towards them either. Some of you are sitting next to somebody that you married. Like, come on, you know this. And if you hadn't taken a step towards them first to say, girl, what your MySpace is, then it never would have happened. I'm so sorry. MySpace was like Facebook before. You know what I mean? Like, you get this. If you don't, come on, it doesn't. And so I'll tell you, for some of you in the room, the honest truth is that you have experienced God from a distance, but not personally. You've experienced God from a distance, waiting for him to show you that he was either trustworthy, real, or that you could control him before you ever took a step towards him to let him respond to the extraordinary. The honest truth for some of you is this too, and this is hard to talk about, I know. Some of you experience deep levels of pain and suffering. And I talked about this over the last 3 weeks in our family. I don't get yours, but I get mine, you know. And it's caused you to question a lot of things. And what you've done is rather than step towards God, you've stepped away. But if you were to get to the guts of it, and this is the really harsh, hard, messy thing, but if there is a God of the universe who is actually all wise and also all powerful, and if this is not all that there is it not true that there's a part of your heart and your life that goes, I don't think I can control it all. And also, I don't understand it all. And you either choose to embrace the version of mystery that says, I can't understand all of that and control it. Or what we do, and I do this too. I still do this. This is like a daily thing. Or I package it to make myself feel safe in the midst of it. And I think for many of us, what God is calling us to do is to step towards him. So like, I've done that. I've prayed the prayer. I've done this. It's a consistent relational deposit and eyes that are open to see the beauty and working of God over and over and over again. The other part about this too, and I'll tell you this, and we talked about this earlier, this is where we're going to kind of end our time today. We talked about the personal part of our stories that are sometimes connected but distantly disconnected to a church, right? I said this before. Some of you, this is your experience right now. That Nuvo is a church, and you get this. For some of you, you've been around long enough, like Nuvo is this church, right? It's like this church that I've been a part of. It's this church that I come to. It's this church that has really great music, like Rachel leading, all that kind of stuff. It's this church where the pastor usually goes over when he's speaking a little bit. There's a little bit of that, and I just want a donut, totally get it. It's this church. It's this church that my kids love to be a part of. It's this church that actually talks about questions and doubts that I have, for sure. There's a little bit of that. But it's this church. And what you've never actually felt because you created barriers and walls on it, is there's a church at this church, but it's not my church. And I'll just tell you, what I want to invite you to be a part of is that. Now there's thousands of steps of faith that you could take along what we've talked about today. And for each one of us, it's likely unique. But for many of us in the room, and I'll miss this, for many of us in the room, some of us need to take a step when it comes to a church and go, it's not going to just be a church. It's not just going to be this church that I show up to sometimes. This is going to be my church. And when you do this, don't miss what happens. You start to take it personal, right? And this is what this is. I take what we do here personally. I got a text this morning, and I love it. I get these all the time. I joke with our teams a lot. I'll say, look, I got this text years ago, and it was like, hey, look, your talks are typically good. Thanks so much. But sometimes they're not great. I need today not to suck. That's what the person texted me. I was like, I'm with you. Me too. And so now I joke with this our team, and I get these texts all the time like, hey, please don't suck today, which is great. I love it. I invited somebody with me, please don't suck. And you know what that is? You ready? That's taking it personally. That's taking it personally. Some of you, I'll give you another example. This is fun. We have a lady named Susan that attends our church, and when we painted the building, there was one spot that we didn't think about, or I didn't think about. And there was like a chandelier here, but there was a square spot that was still like a weird, dirty brown. And you didn't notice it because it was only like 3 inches around, or I didn't notice it, 3 inches around the thing. And she comes in all nice. She goes, hey, look, it's great. I love the thing. I'm like, there's water leaking from the ceiling with a bucket, but let's look at this one, though. That's good. And she looks at it, and I love it. She goes, I just want to come in and paint that thing. I was like, why do you want to paint that? And she goes, because I care about the way that it looks and seems. I love that. She takes it personally, right? I love it this week. We brought in all of our kids, which I love this. You saw that. And the logistics around this is really tough because it's all locked down back there. Like there's like, it's kind of like there's Fort Knox and wherever they keep all the UFO stuff. I'm just kidding. But there's all that stuff. And then there's Nuvo kids. You know what I mean? Like it's all locked down. And here's what I love about that. It takes a lot of things to do that and to do it well. But I'll just tell you. I got all these like some questions. How are we gonna do it? What's it look like? How are we gonna do it? And people were a little bit amped up, which is great. You know why? To take it personally. They take it personally. So here's what I'm gonna tell you. There's 1,000 steps that you could take, but for those of you who need to take this step, which I do think is a lot of us, right? I'm gonna tell you how we want you to do it. If I could convince you to take the step from going like, this is a church that I attend, to this is my church, I'm gonna tell you two things. One of them is something that I want to invite you to be a part of. The second one is going to be a part that you've never probably heard a pastor say. I've only said it twice now in my whole life. And so we're going to be really honest and transparent about the second one too, and invite you into that. And neither one of them have to do with money, so everybody can go ahead and unbutt clench right there. So here they go. All right, here we go. First one is this. We're going to ask you to make bold invitations, right? Now here's why this matters. Ready? You talk about the things that you care about. You do. Now many of us don't know how to talk about church, and it's hard, and I get it. But I've talked about all this earlier, and I said this. Until you see our church, right? If we go there, until you see our church through the eyes of someone that you've invited, you'll never experience our church to the fullest. You just won't. Until you see it through the eyes of somebody you invited, you'll never experience it to the fullest. Now, here's how you know this. You ready? Some of you are sitting next to somebody you're invited, so we're just going to make it real awkward for you. But I'm going to tell you what this is like. When you're sitting next to somebody that you invited, right, here's what happens, right? When the worship leader's up there singing, you're very in tune with it. And then when the worship leader starts talking, you're like, okay, if we say something, don't talk about fire falling from heaven in this moment. Like a little bit of that, you know what I mean? Like say, and you get it, and you feel it. When I'm talking, you're a little bit nervous the whole time, right? And I totally get it. I totally get it. When you walk in, you see guest services and greeters, and you know this too. You experience this. You're like, be friendly, but not too much. You know what I mean? Like high fives, not hugs. Fist bumps are great. Stay away. You know what I mean? A little bit of that. Like you experience it through those eyes. When you drop off kids, and you know this, like, please let it feel safe immediately. Right? You feel those things. But you never experience the fullness of our church until you see it through the eyes of somebody who's coming for the first time. And so here's my challenge for you. This is the challenge, right? Every Nouveau attender, everybody that's an attender, I would love this, is to have a plan to invite others to join you. Now, the immediately pushback from anybody who's skeptical is, well, he just wants the big church and all. It's great. Let me just tell you. I worked at the second largest church in the country. We had 3,000 to 4,000 middle schoolers. We've done big. I get big. I was in my early 20s. It was like Mecca. Like this was amazing. My budget was more than my house. We've done it. It's great. I love it. And I hope that we get big. It's not about big. We've done big. We can do big. I got an LED wall. We're big enough. I get big. It's not big. Because people donated it. Right? All those questions is people donated this stuff. Not the wall, but pretty much everything else we get. So let me tell you this, though. When it comes to this, it's because we care about people who don't know Jesus yet. And we believe that there is a redemptive nature to the gospel message with people in our lives. So I'm going to tell you how easy it is. Everybody feels a little bit nervous. I feel nervous about this. I told our leadership team the other night, I was with a friend. We're at Waffle House because, well, that's the thing I thought I would never do when I got older, but there you go. Anyway, I stopped eating at Waffle House. Anyway, so I went, still feeling it right now. Anyway, so I went to Waffle House, and when I got there, right, I'm looking at this waitress, and she's fantastic. And I was like, in my head, I was like, I'm about to do a message where we talk about inviting people to church. And everything in me was like, we should invite her. And you know the only thing I thought about was the guy sitting in front of me and what he was going to think, who's attended our church since the beginning. He just also happens to have cooler glasses. You know what I mean? Like he's like super cool, and he's kind of sitting there. I'm like, I'm a little bit nervous. What's he going to think of me? And I'm sitting here thinking about him and not at all thinking about the other person, right? And I know how to do this, right? We do this all the time. And I'm like, what is that thing? I know that it's hard and it can feel awkward. Some of you at work, it feels weird. I get it, right? So here's what I'm going to tell you. This is the bold, this is how it works. When somebody that you know or somebody that you don't know goes, hey, how are you and how are you doing? Here's how easy it is. What do you immediately talk about? I'm doing good. Life's pretty good. Let me tell you about work. Work's going real well. You know what I mean? It's great. Biggest quarter we've ever had. I hate my boss, whatever that is. You know, like whatever it is, you do, right? How about Elon Musk? Like wherever you go, you're talking about work, right? You talk about work. And, oh, that's great. You do work. Then you go, how's your family and kids? Family kids are great. You talk about this. You talk about family. You talk about kids. You have your stock answers sometimes, and every once in a while you go a little bit deeper. You have this sort of thing, right? And then you have like a hobby that you've connected over. Everybody talks about connecting hobbies, right? Things that you're interested in, all this kind of stuff. And then I'm going to give you the line. Are you ready? This is the line. This makes it so easy. And it'll floor people, and it'll be so easy to talk about. You ready? So you talked about work, talked about family. Yeah, things are great at work. Kids and family are doing great. Oh, yeah, here's a hobby. Oh, yeah, I like baseball too. That's great. You know, it's cool as we're part of this church that we're launching a church. And you watch the people's faces. Are you ready? They'll go, huh. You know, and it's not, and we anticipate that as awkward or that they don't like it, which is generally not true. There's been so many studies. It's so fascinating. Even people who don't like church don't not like people who go to church that aren't weird. The problem isn't that you attend church. The problem is that you beat them with a Bible. That's weird. Or that you go, well, if you don't this, then, you know, or political, whatever. Like, no. I'm a part of a church. That's not a not typical thing. It's not that hard to talk about. Just go, yeah, I'm a part of Launching a Church. It's brand new. How about this? It meets an Italian restaurant. And they don't serve food. Easy. And that's all you have to say. And then all you have to say is this, right? And then I'd love for you to come sit with me. I'll take you to lunch after. And you ready for the fun part? You ready for this? And then Nuvo's going to pay for the lunch. You didn't even have to say that. We're going to pay you for the lunch. Now, I said this a few weeks ago, and I've been waiting for one person to take me up on it. One person, right? I said a few weeks ago, if you invite somebody and take them to lunch afterwards, we'll pay for both of your lunches. Nobody texted me a receipt. So we're still doing it. I'd love for you to do it. And you know why we're doing it? Everyone's like, well, is that how you use church money? It's cheaper than marketing. It's cheaper than Facebook ads. I'll buy your dinner. Now, if you get like a filet, and we could talk about that, but that's great. I mean, we'll still do it. I'm just saying, don't get kids chicken fingers, which is what I would get. But, have a good lunch. We'll pay for it because it's cheaper than marketing. And here's why this matters. You ready? Because then afterwards, they're either going to go, man, I love your church. That was really cool. Or you know what they're going to say? I didn't like your church, and here's why. And then I want you to tell me why. And you know why? Because then we'll get better, and we'll take it personal together. Now, I want to say one last thing around this, and then we're going to go into the harder, transparent, this is fun. Last thing around this is you're in a month where it's as easy to invite people to. People come back to church at Easter all the time. People will come at Easter that never come to church the rest of the year. This is the easiest time to invite people on the planet for the next 3 weeks. I'm going to ask you to develop a plan and be intentional about talking about your church. Not a church, not this church, but your church. And I'm going to ask you to have a plan around inviting. And the last thing I'm going to say is this, and this is interesting. We're going to invite you to be a person who intentionally serves here. Now, at our church from the very beginning, and I told some of our teams this past week, from the very beginning, we've had this principle that's been rooted in us that says this, that we're going to lock arms together to accomplish the miraculous work that God is doing. Right? We're going to lock arms together to accomplish the miraculous work that God is doing. And I'll just tell you this, and this is really honest, you know this. You can be a part and be a spectator, you can be a participant, but you can be disconnected from it a little bit. But you don't experience the fullness of the community that a church offers until you serve and you're part of that place. You just don't. And this story after story after story. We've been doing these Nuvo stories. We're going to hear more of them throughout the series. Every story that we talked about, right? Every single one of them. They don't talk about my sermons. I wish they would talk about it more, but that's fine. Just kidding, I'm totally kidding. Secondly, they talk about people. They talk about the teams that they serve with. They talk about the people that were there with them, right? You experience our church to the fullest when you're intentionally serving in it. So I'm going to tell you what our greatest need is. Now, this is the part that no pastor ever says. This is a pride thing. I don't know why we don't say it, but this is the honest truth. We have a need. And we have a unique need here, right? And our greatest current need on Sundays is great volunteers and Nuvo kids who serve consistently, right? This is our greatest need. Now, there's a lot of places where you can serve, and I would love for you to serve wherever it is you feel called to serve. But I'll tell you about this particular need and how our church is unique in this and how it's both amazing and maddening for me at the same time, okay? Let me tell you how this works. Most churches our size typically have around 36 kids, right? If you look at the national average of churches that are our size, you can expect to have about 36 kids that attend, right? On average right now, this is an average Sunday, high Sundays, low Sundays. Our average right now is 50, which is like 14. Is that a lot? It is a lot. If you work in kids, 14 is a lot. It's a lot. That's good. You get it. It's a lot. Now, but that's with the lowest days, like the snow days and spring breaks and everything in it. The more interesting number that we hit a lot is a number where we have about 67 kids between preschool and elementary that are part of this. Now, this is awesome. And to be fully transparent with you, this is what we've been praying for. Somebody's like, why did you go to one service? Because we wanted to create an amazing environment for elementary school students. But it feels packed in here. And I know it does. But I'd rather have enough of you so that your elementary school students feel like something is great back there than you to have a little bit more elbow room. So we pack in chairs in here. I know that, right? But for us, 67 kids, right? And here's the interesting part about this, and I'll tell you literally what we need. Now, this is where we're at. We need great Nuvo Kids volunteers to impact the next generation and lean into it. So I'm going to tell you what this is like, and I'm going to be, again, really upfront and say things that most people never say. There's three categories of people when it comes to kids. There's the category of people that as soon as I say children, you're like, oh my God, I love kids. And you're like, you've already signed up. Like you've already filled out the card, you're ready to go. Like all I had to do was mention that you love all children, that sort of thing. And then some of you, let's just be real, you hate kids. You don't like kids. You're the uncle that's like at Christmas, like, thank you so much, don't touch me. You know what I mean? Like you get a gift so that they go away. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit of that. And so I am not talking to you. We do not want you and kids. Now, the middle section of you, this is the more honest group, right? The middle section of you, this is the vast majority, I think, of people, especially if you have kids. You're like, I like my kids most of the time, and I kind of like other people's kids, but not really. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit of that. And it's not that you don't, it's just like, they're great. And I'm so glad that you parent that way, but go parent that way over there. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of that. Like you like kids, you really like your kids, but everybody else's kids you're not sure about. So I don't want you to miss this. And in this section, you hear me say 67 kids, you break that down, was it like 35-ish in each room? And you know this? And what you feel, and I don't miss this, what you feel is going, I don't have the capacity to love and serve 35 kids. And you know what? We all agree with you. You can't. You don't. And you won't. But the truth of the matter is that most of us have the capacity to love and serve 1 to 3 kids that aren't our own. And most of the time when church talk about this, is like, well, all the kids, it's going to be equal, and everybody's going to get the same amount, and the truth of the matter is that is literally impossible. We just can't do it. Unless I put 1-to-1 every single time, and then we've got to match personalities, and then it's impossible to do it equally across the board. And so I tell kids volunteers all the time, it's not going to be equal. I can't ask you to do it equal. You're a human being. You won't. But there are 1 to 3 kids who need you to speak into their life. Not 35, but there's 1 to 3. And the real truth about this is that 1 to 3 could grip your heart in a way where cause you to do things you never thought they cause you to dance in a thing you never thought you'd dance, or cause you to watch Bluey for the first time in a long time because you care about it, or cause you to play a video game you don't even like video because you care about the human kid. Now, we're going to wrap up in a second. I'll tell you, the best example of this I had is, maybe you heard my story a lot. We talked about my mom's cancer earlier. We found out that pretty early on, there was a small group leader that we had who had 12 students in a small group. I actually just talked to him this past week, ironically. And he cared about me, right? He didn't care about all 12. I mean, maybe he cared about them all equally, but he couldn't show care the same way to all 12, but he cared about me. And in a time where my life was tough and it was difficult and painful, he cared about the things that I cared about. And the thing that I cared about at that age was John Mayer. I'm 35. The thing I still care about is John Mayer. He's on tour right now. We'll have to take a season in Pittsburgh. Anyway, so there's all that, right? Just kidding. And there's this piece, right? Let me tell you, there's this piece of this that's so fascinating where he goes, I'm going to care about him to the point where I'm going to do what matters with him. And so he calls up my mom. John Mayer was coming on tour, and Counting Crows were opening. Anybody remember Counting Crows? That sentence feels backwards, doesn't it, right? Counting Crows opened for John Mayer. And he's like, you know what? Let me see if I can convince your mom. I'll take you to this concert. He takes me to this concert. And the whole way down, you know what we talked about? We talked about John Mayer. I can tell you the song John was going to play based off the guitar he pulled out during the concert. I was a big fan. We talked about it the whole time. He didn't care about music at all, but he cared about me. So we drove 2 hours to this concert. We get to the concert. John Mayer plays. There's a song off his first album. I won't go into detail. The last word in the song is Wonderland, if you've ever heard this song. So just picture this. I'm a pretty young kid. All of a sudden, a girl in the third row decides to Wonderland. And he literally gets me in a headlock. He goes, oh, God, your mom's going to kill me. So I'm like down like this. Like, what's happening? I don't know. And then she was excited to be there. Anyway, so there was that. And then on the way home, you know what we did? We talked about what mattered to me, which at the time was my mom and the cancer stuff and all this kind of stuff. And I'll just tell you this. He walked with me through a season of my life that mattered a lot. And as much as we could cast vision around, he would do that for every kid. He couldn't do it. As much as we could say that you can never show favoritism, that's not true, because you do and you have to, and there are things that you lean into. I'm not asking you to love and care for 35 of them. I'm asking you to serve and show up for 1 to 3 and to step up, if you're in that middle range, for the 1 to 3 that God is calling you to reach. So I'll tell you what just happened for some of you. Some of you in the room were like, that was a great story, doesn't matter to me. Some of you in the room were like, I'm already serving, thanks so much. Some of you in the room were like, I felt a nudge and I'm really skeptical about the whole thing. And if you felt a nudge and you're really skeptical about the whole thing, I want you to take a step. Not all the way down, not committing the rest of your life to this whole thing, but a step in that direction to explore what that looks like. All right, and we try to make it so easy for you. So here's what we're going to do, right? I'm going to ask everybody if you would, and would follow me along if you'll do this. Everybody, if you would, take out your cell phones real quick, right? I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. Super easy, and we're not going to spam you. Let's go to that cell phone slide if we can. I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, right? Here's what we're going to do. Everybody take out, if everybody just humor me, you could even get on Twitter. This is a great time to RSVP for Easter if you haven't done it. There you go. So go ahead and take it out, right? Here's what I'm going to ask you to do, right? If you are adamantly no about this, fantastic. I want you to tell us that you're adamantly no about it. So I want everybody in the room, you can do this, to text the word personal to 94, is that 1,000? 94,000, 9430. Everybody in the room do this. 94,000, that's great. That's great. Text word personal. And if you're like adamantly no, that's one of the options, which is great. I think we actually put H no. I'm just kidding. We didn't put that. That's great. Great. No, you put that. Now, here's the thing, though. Some of you are like, kids is where I need to serve, and that's a great spot. Some of you, you're like, you know what? It's not going to be that. It's definitely not. But I do feel like I need to take a step of serving somewhere. So when you text that number, it's going to give you a list of options, 1 through 5, of places that you can serve. I hope several of you choose the kids one. I do. And if you don't, I hope you choose one that's going to move you forward in the next step, where God's moving you to serve to where you go, it's not a church or this church, but this is my church. And then you move in that direction, right? So all you got to do is respond 1 to 5, whichever one of those you want, which is 1 through 4. And then the last one going, hey, not right now. I'm sure we said it a lot nicer than the way that I said it. Not right now. That's not for me. All right, to wrap up, and then I'm going to pray for us. We're going to end it up, and that's this, right? One more time. This is the thing I hope you take away from today. Throughout this series, we're going to spend time talking about it, and not every week we're going to ask you to text this number, I promise. But throughout this week, we're going to talk about what it looks like to make this church your church. But I'll say it this way. The bottom line is this, that I will make this church my church by choosing to invite and choosing to serve and contribute somewhere. That's what I'm going to ask you to do. And over the course of this next series, we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like. I'd love for you to consider doing that. All right, let me do this. Let me pray for us, and then we're all going to go eat a lot of donuts. And by that, I mean I'm going to go eat a lot of donuts real quick. So let's pray together. Father, we thank you so much for what you've done here and what you're doing inside of us. God, we thank you that for many of us, we do have a next step to take when it comes to our journey of following you. And God, we ask that you would move us towards whatever that is. Some of us immediately resist anything when it comes to feeling like we need to take a step. And I get that. I'm wired that way 100%. But God, I pray that whatever it takes for us to see that this might be true in us, that we can join you in the miraculous things that you do. God, I pray that you would help us to lean into it. God, you would help us to move in that direction. God, I pray that you would help us to do the things that you're calling us to do and experience the power and the beauty on the other side of it. And God, we thank you for what you're doing in kids. We thank you for the fact that you have called us to be stewards of these kids and that there's only more kids that are coming. And so, Father, I pray that you would help us. God, you would help us to create the kind of place that you've called us to create for every single one of those kids that you've called us to steward. And the relationships with their families. God, the trajectories that are going to be changed because people invest in those relationships. God, we thank you for that. And we trust you with it. God, we pray that throughout the rest of this series, as we talk about what it looks like to be not just more involved in a church, but for the things that have drawn us here to move us forward and being contributors to it. God, I pray that you would help us to see with the eyes that you would have us to see all those experiences. In Jesus' name we pray.